a problem with that. I'm a Muslim.
Yes, it
but
is.
you generalise about Muslims.
No, I don't. I'm trying to talk about a specific case, but you're not interrupting me. No, you don't know the case. On Holocaust denial, the reason why Holocaust denial, why I'm spoken against it and written against it routinely, is yes, precisely because it gives one group an ownership of a part of history that cannot be touched, which I think is a problem. I think it's a mistake. Apart from anything else, because as always happens, other groups notice it. When Sikhs rioted outside Beheshti, I was against that because I also knew if other groups came on this, and they will, if they succeed this, other groups will come in. Lo and behold, Jerry Springer, the opera, more evangelical Christians want to. If you give people the idea that one group can have protected space, other groups will follow. Other groups will request the same thing. And we see this now with the Holocaust denial laws, with other groups wanting certain parts of their own history ring-fenced. The other thing is, of course, and just to bring on Timothy's point on this, and the point that Orwell made about this, is how much weaker it makes us as a society when we say there is something that cannot be said. And one of my favourite columns of Orwell's from Tribune in 1947 or 6, I think, is his description of what you would do if you met a flat earther. And he said, what mentally thinking about it, how would I do this? He said, I could probably do the horizon thing, and the ship sailing along it doesn't remain the same. I could do some things, but how would I actually explain to somebody that I know the Earth to be round? And what would I do if I met somebody who said, it's not flat, but it's cone-shaped? All these things are different. The point I'm trying to make here, we weaken ourselves. He says, of course, he'd have to have the worst thing of all. He recognizes that he would have to say at some point, I can't explain why I know the Earth is round, but I know a man who can. This is a very useful thought demonstration to do, and this is the problem with Holocaust denial laws, is that they make us as a society no less. And I think, by the way, if you speak to certainly the younger generation of scholars now on the Second World War and the Holocaust, I would say, and I hope it's not preemptive fuddy-duddery, that they are knowing less than some of their predecessors for precisely this reason. That if you ring-fence ideas, if you ring-fence things in history, you don't have to know as much. What will these people do against David Irving? David Irving will know more than them. Because they haven't had to rub against this, they haven't had to try it out, they've been ring-fenced from offence. This is a terrible...
Well, on that point, don't you think, and this is what I'm slightly concerned.
So before we get to Mehdi Hasan's response, basically, what Doug is saying, what I agree as well, is that once you give these intersectionality groups some safe space and you allow a certain group, a certain entity, whether it's social, whether it's collegiate, whether it's, private, whether it's business, whether it's, religious or society, whatever it is, and you basically say, hey, you know what? You can't say certain things about this group. That's why I think those anti-Semitic laws are unconstitutional. At least I think they would be here in the United States of America. If you want to go ahead and deny something, hey, you're free to deny it. That's your opinion. As long as you are not causing an act, something that's going to be acted upon in terms of, any type of violence that could be attached to what you're saying, that you're not starting any type of, chaos. Like I've said before, you want to call somebody fat? You want to call somebody shorty? You want to call somebody an idiot, a moron, stupid? Whatever it is that you want to say, you have a right to say it. But when it crosses the line, when it becomes actionable, when some harm could be done to somebody in terms of physical, not this type of thing that, oh, I feel threatened, because you called me fat, nothing like that. But if a reasonable person could ascertain and say, you know what you said crossed a line because it was about to cause chaos, it could cause harm, it could promote that type of activity, well, then it needs to stop. But once you start giving one certain group a safe space, everybody is going to demand it. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Take a look with the trans group. Can't say anything about trans. Can't say, the LGBTQ, MOUSE. You try to say something about them. on the religious front, on the racial front, ethnic front, cultural appropriation, triggering, all those things are happening. So it just, like it says, once you make these laws and you allow a certain group or a certain person or persons to be allowed to be safe, the other groups are going to smell the blood in the water and they're going to come in like sharks and demand of their own. Let's get back to Mehdi's response. But before we do so, you're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective on what happens when you've got social media, you've got religion, politics, you've got business, you've got biology, you've got science, and they all come crashing together. Let's hear from Mehdi right now.
But the discussion is, and I'm not surprised it came down this way, but the discussion is about Islam, Muslims, religion. The discussion is not about government, state, military, which for me are the much bigger threats. We can talk, I condemn and abhor those of my co-religionists who threaten Danish cartoonists with violence. They need to get a life. And I condemn that mad Somali axeman who broke into the house recently. I remember reading it and thinking, what a nutcase. But, and I'm not apologising here, that is not the same thing as governments across the West, for example, cracking down in all sorts of different ways on, for example, on free speech. You haven't mentioned at all, Douglas, nobody in the audience mentioned that more people have been killed, more journalists have been killed in the last few years by the United States military than by any radical Muslim in war zones. Journalists have been killed now by armed forces, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Israel, whether it's America. That's a much bigger threat to free speech. Journalists being killed by armed forces of free countries. For me, that's a much, much bigger issue, but no one talks about it.
So what was that Mehdi Hasan was saying, that there have been more journalists killed by the military-industrial complex of the United States, Israel, and the West than have ever been killed by Islamists or Muslimists or terrorist groups, right? That's what Mehdi Hasan is intimating. One thing you have to understand about Mehdi Hasan, he basically takes facts that are out there, shapes them and molds them to the way that he wants to present them. So it is true that a lot of journalists have been killed. But now you've got to ask yourself, wait a minute. Okay, more journalists have been killed by Americans, American government, Israeli government, and other Western governments. So let's fact check Mehdi Hasan and see whether or not he's telling the truth or not. I'm going to go to an article, link it to this one here. Watch this, folks. This is what you've got to understand. You've got to do your own homework. You've got to do your own due diligence. You've got to fact check these people every single freaking time, because they will lie to you, or they will completely bend over or bend that perspective, that narrative, to something that they want you to feel, oh, wow, yeah, wow, more journalists have been killed by Americans and really the government and Western governments? Wow, what's everybody getting so upset about if a terrorist hasn't done as much as the American government has? Let's go that cut right now. So here we are. This is according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, all right? And this is from the pbs.org NewsHour show. So you can go to pbs.org and you can go basically what's behind a sharp increase in journalist killings around the world, right? According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 2022 was one of the deadliest years on record for journalists around the globe. 50% increase in killings. Now, the people that were doing the investigation, they're talking about these. These are the journalists, right? Talking about why. So, here it is. Over the past 5 years, 289 journalists have been killed worldwide, many in retaliation for the work they were doing. Last year, 67 journalists were killed, the highest number in a single year since 2018. But what did Mehdi say? Didn't he say that these were being caused by the American, Israeli, and other Western governments? It says that more than half of those deaths occurred in just 3 countries. Ukraine, 15 died covering Russia's brutal war there. No Americans or, Western Europeans that I know of, or Israelis over there. How about in Mexico and Haiti? Saw the sharpest rise. 30 journalists were killed in Latin America alone. don't know of too many American bombings going on in Mexico and Latin America, and Israeli, bombings or from the Western European governments, right? That's nearly half of all journalists killed. And it goes to say there's a couple of reasons. Highest number of killings was Ukraine. You're going to expect that from international conflict, but they're also being killed outside of war zones. So what's this military-industrial complex thing going on between the United States, Israel, and other Western things, other Western governments? It says when nearly half the deaths were in the Latin American region, which is officially not in any conflict. So there was only one killing of a journalist here in the United States last year. And you can go to that, folks, all right? But let's get back to the debate between Douglas and Mehdi. But I just wanted to point out that Mehdi certainly, somebody should have fact-checked him right there and told him that he's completely wrong and absolutely lying about what the hell is killing journalists around the world. Let's go back to the debate. We'll go to that cut right now.
There's something dishonest in this, which is that, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but the British Army doesn't aim to shoot journalists. And the American Army doesn't seek the death of journalists.
Well, that's debatable.
Well,
when they bomb an Al Jazeera headquarters, that how they have the coordinates for beforehand twice, and when journalists unions around the world condemn it, it's very easy for you to laugh it off. Why don't you say that to the wife of the journalist?
Well, I'm perfectly happy to continue discussing this. And if you just, I'm not speaking to anyone's wife about this. I'm discussing the following point, which is that, as far as I know, it is not British Army policy, maybe, to shoot journalists. What you seem to imply is something quite other than that. Now, people do get killed in war zones, that's true. And no one on this panel is arguing that they should. So I don't...
Well, no one on this panel is arguing that they should be killed either.
But the intention matters, as you say. And the intention, when it comes to the people that we're talking about in relation to cartoons, is part of the problem. And not just of the individuals who do it, but you will not find a cleric, I would imagine, in Britain or America who would approve, for instance, or not fail to condemn such a killing. I think you find it very hard to. It is for some of us about the free speech debate in relation to Islam, one of the most troubling things is not just the very small minority who would carry out acts of violence, but the larger number of people, albeit still a minority maybe, although the majority of certain clerics, who do not go out of their way, as they should, I think, to condemn such behaviour. Can I just pick up on one thing that Timothy said, which is in relation also to the, it comes back to the point about, that was raised about the trickle-down effect of freedom of speech, because somebody mentioned, and maybe mentioned, how this stuff, we talk about this here, I may say something offensive here to Muslims, but how does this feel, as it were, if it trickles down in society? People who will do bad things and might interpret it as it were, licensed to say something horrible and objectionable to a vulnerable Muslim child. The truth is, you cannot police this process. Because once you decide there are things that cannot be said because a thug or an unpleasant person of any variety is going to pick it up and mistreat it, you go in a very bad direction. There are quite enough stupid bigots in the world who are willing to interpret anything as incitement to violence. But do you really want to start saying that our laws on freedom of speech for everyone will be decided by these people? I don't think they can be. And the final thing on this, when it comes to offence and to being offended on this is sadly something we simply have to deal with. Every day in my adult life, I feel offence. I feel offence when I open the gun. I feel offence when I open the newspaper. I feel offence when I turn on the television. I feel offence when I walk down the street. I feel offence when I see stupid people. I see offence when I meet very sensitive people. I have all sorts of things, a wide range of things in a day that offend me. But I do not believe that the way to stop that is for me or anyone who agrees with me to legislate that offence away. I said this when I reviewed Kenan Malik's pretty good book on the Fatwa of the Jihad about this, when a member of the Muslim Council of Britain, Najat Baghlawala, said about the Rushdie case, he said, I didn't understand, genuinely, as a teenager in North England, I didn't understand with satanic verses why we were being singled out. And one of the tragedies that came across in that book is that nobody seems to have got it through to Inyat Bandawala in the meantime. That the satanic verses was not a singling out of Muslims. It was treating Muslims in exactly the same way as every other group in society are treated. Which is to say, you will have, in a free, pluralistic, multicultural society, you will have your opinions trodden upon, including your deepest opinions, on a fairly regular basis.
But if I to offend people on the basis of their race.
I wouldn't like to have laws that stop that. And for the
We do have
let me finish this point. If I may finish this point, is that we have to be much better in society at explaining, and explaining also to people who come to our society recently, that having the right to be offended is one of the most fundamental rights we have, and that a society in which even your deepest, most deeply held convictions are trodden upon regularly are the only societies worth living.
While I agree with Douglas with your views on Moses and the Pentateuch and those things, I think you make a step when you say truth and then you say, in my opinion, that's truth.
Well, I was trying to be more polite.
Yes, no, I appreciate that, but it was still an opinion I thought not truth.
Anybody else want to just say something? Because I very much. Okay, you, then you.
Well, just in the interest of not confirming Saeed's point, it's worth stating that the main Muslim organisations in the UK continuously publish press releases stating their condemnation of terrorist attacks and all sorts of attacks, including the ones on the cartoonists in Denmark. And the fact that someone like Douglas, who actually, seems to focus primarily on the Muslim community, doesn't seem to be aware of these or seems to ignore them, is actually a confirmation of my point, which is that Douglas is on a platform talking about how these things aren't happening. They are actually happening, but none of you are hearing about it, and that's the issue.
Can I pick on that very quickly?
No, you can't. I want to get the other
free speech is being denied.
I've just become a bit confused now about what offence is and what it means to be offended. Like walking down the street and being offended, I just don't understand how that compares to being offended. I just want clarification.
Anybody else just want to? Does anybody else want their hand up? Okay. Quickly.
Quickly, Holocaust denial, Timothy, could have gone on to mention, I'm sure, is that the moment the Holocaust denial laws suddenly passed here, clerics and people like Ahmadinejad in Iran always said, look, there are holy things in Europe they cannot say. How come they are allowed to cartoon the Prophet Muhammad, but they ban things? You see, they have holy things as well. It's a terrible, terrible rod for free society bans. Secondly, the MCB, Mullah Council of Britain, one of its most senior members, Dawud Abdullah, signed the Istanbul Declaration that calls open attacks on anyone who supports or has ships in the area outside Gaza in helping the international blockade. That, I think, is a serious thing for one of the heads of the biggest umbrella organisation that was in the UK to do.
You support the Israeli illegal bombing of Lebanon, so this is ridiculous. Now you think about political view.
Well, no, because no, it's not irrelevant at all. We can have that debate back and I wouldn't expect you to agree with me on that, but I also wouldn't expect anyone to pass laws against it. But this comes on to one of the other things, is that if you start to pass laws, this is one of the reasons I think there's a problem with the race hate laws as well. Not because I think that people should go around saying racist things about each other, of course not. But I have to say, I'm not sure that it does make racists behave any better. I personally feel that if somebody is a racist, I'd rather I knew the fact. I'd rather that I knew what they thought about me.
Yes.
No, hang on. Okay, let's try it another way. This ties in with what the lady here. This is what the lady here said about walking down the street. Look, I've used this example many times, but let me give it to you fast. Very fast. If you're a gay man like me and you walk down the streets of Britain hand in hand with your boyfriend, there are about 3 streets in Britain you will not get abused, I can guarantee it. It's much worse than a lot of the abuse that people talk about routinely as being unfettered. Now, let me pick up on this. I don't think that people who shout certain things at me should be criminalised. And if they're bigoted homophobes, I want to know they are. And I'd much rather live in a society where I knew that than I cut them over and they hid behind me.
I want to bring in you, and then you.
Well, my point quickly is that when he's called you offence, can we hear someone else speak?
I'm not surprised, but I am disappointed that the entire debate is about Muslims and Islam, because in sense of Timothy, I do think there are huge issues, as the UN has pointed out, about libel laws. The Culture Select Committee has just published a report today about the balance all being wrong in our libel laws. That rich people could come here and shut up novelists, journalists, editors. We don't hear anything about that. These are huge issues. Anti-terror laws, locking up people on the basis of what they say. For example, in Luton recently, no matter how abusive. These are huge issues, and we don't talk about them. Instead, we talk about Muslims, Muslims, Muslims. And while I accept Timothy's point, that, and perhaps I'm happy to apologise or rephrase if you thought I was understating. Not at all. It's disgusting that Muslims threaten non-Muslims with violence, but at the same time, it's also disgusting that there is an entire cadre of journalists, columnists, who abuse Islam and Muslim every day freely without any death threats whatsoever, without any threats to their career, let alone death threats. And I just think we have to get everything in proportion. We have to get offence in proportion. This idea, you made the point of walking down the street, I think this is absurd, and to use your phrase, trite, to say that you're offended by what you read in The Guardian, and compare that to how Muslims felt about the cartoons and their attack on their prophet, who Muslims regard as more important. I love the prophet more than I love my own 2-year-old child. You'll never understand that. I don't expect you, that's fine. But to compare the two is nonsense, and it is trite, because the only valid point you've made tonight is that you as a gay man get homophobic abuse. And you're right, and you shouldn't. And the idea that you get it from The Guardian or the New Statesman is absurd. So this idea that you're offended by that, that's the only point you can make a legitimate point of. You cannot tell me that I don't mind racism. Sorry. Yes, I do. On racism, I do have deeper feelings of Douglas. You're white, I'm brown, I'm the minority, we're the ones who suffer racism. I'm fed up of people telling me, it's fine to be racist. I want to hear what a racist is. I don't. Yes, you did. You said, I want to hear if someone is a racist. You said, well, those are your words.
Know if they're racist.
Yes, well, I don't. I'd rather they keep their racist views to themselves. I'm glad we live in a Britain now where racist people do keep their views to themselves, apart from the racists and the BNP who use religion as a cover, and that's a real problem, even if the religious law is not the right thing to do. There are huge problems in our society. It makes no sense, and it's you who are being dishonest to say it's all about Islam.
Well, Mehdi Hasan coming of his own, starting to come out of his shell all of a sudden. I know that debate or discussion was completely dominated in terms of time by Douglas Murray, but that's only because nobody else stepped in to say anything. Because I think most of the time they're just either in awe of Douglas, or they know that the points he's making, they don't have any counterpoints to attack him on. Mehdi just basically sat there, and then finally, when he got his chance to answer a question from the audience, that's when he decided to basically say, hey, all we're doing is talking about Muslims and Islam. We're not talking about libel laws, about people coming from overseas and attacking our journalists and slandering us and doing all sorts of, mean things to journalists or whatever. I mean, I don't even understand what that had to, unless that's what the debate and discussion was supposed to be about. I don't know, but I would imagine that if you bring on someone like Mehdi Hasan and you bring on someone like Douglas Murray, I don't think the topic of discussion everybody wants to hear is about libel laws. I think they want to hear their opinions on multiculturalism, on what Douglas thinks about immigrants and refugees and Islam and Christianity and what's happening. They want to hear Mehdi Hasan talk about, what's happening, with Islam and what's happening with, if there's any bigotry or racism, that's still prevalent out there with the different diverse groups, in Great Britain. Well, how is it affecting him? What does he feel about it? What are his counterpoints to what Douglas Murray says? Douglas Murray asking him, what do you think Mehdi is saying? Is there any points of agreement? Where are your contentions of disagreement? Those are the kind of questions people want to know about. That's what I want to know about. Douglas Murray, control the debate. If you can control the debate, more power to you. Doesn't mean that you're going to win or you won the debate. Just means that you're the one that's doing all the talking and nobody is countering anything that you're saying. And at any time, Mehdi could have stepped in and done it, but he really didn't until the very end. So anyways, folks, thanks for taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host, Dr. Nasir. If we've earned your subscription, you like our content, please subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow. You know what to do. Check out our video links above and below. Put your comments down. I'd love to share with us. My final thought, when you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.